Chapter 2. The day before. Tyler Machine. It was very late and Tyler always watched the news. It was like he held out hope that maybe they would finally report something good. He thought to himself that heroes must only exist in fiction. The 6-month murder spree had gotten everyone's attention. It was like a soap opera. Who would get taken? When would the body show up? Would the cops ever find the killer? God forbid they actually save someone. I'm doing it, he thought to himself. It may not stop everything, but it might deter a few. He grabbed a backpack and walked the block or so to Malik's Inc. Breaking in wasn't hard. There were no alarms, and the lock on the back door wasn't a big deal. He grabbed what he needed and headed for the back door. Before he left, he stopped and looked back at the interior of the shop. It used to be a barber shop. It was, in fact, the same one that his piece of crap father used to take him to. Kids that were good and didn't cry while getting a haircut got a lollipop. That's not exactly what Tyler got. After walking back from the craziest thing he had ever done sober, he dumped the stuff at his house and got in his car. However, he was about to top that list, if his courage and resolve held out, that is. He drove to the worst part of town he could find and parked. He got out and started walking. He didn't exactly know who he was looking for, but bad parts of town usually held bad people. Maybe he would hear a domestic disturbance, some drunk dad slapping his wife around. He walked down an alley behind an apartment building. That's when he saw her. A young blonde girl had been beaten and strangled to death, probably raped. He knelt down beside her. He knew how it felt. He knew the fear, knew the pain, all the things that come from abuse. He had been spared death, but which is worse, living with it or having it end? This is where he probably would have ended up. Thinking about his past and looking at the dead girl made tears well up in his eyes. Emotion was getting the better of him, and he felt like he needed a drink. There was something other than the fact that she had been badly abused that was familiar to him. Had he seen the face before? He searched his memory and it came to him. It was the girl he had seen on the news, just 8 years old. When he started his mission, he thought he might find something, but he didn't think he would find something this significant this fast. It was a dangerous moment. What if a cop rolled down the alley? He could easily be blamed. DNA would eventually clear him, but that takes time. Time allowed the guilty to easily get away. Something fell over behind him and made him jump. Had to have her one more time, someone said through slurred speech. He saw the other body, the still living one, lying next to an overturned box of trash. Seemed like a good place to dump her, the drunk mumbled. Tyler's fear turned to rage in an instant. He kicked the drunk in the face, hoping his foot would go through the other side of his head. Then, just as quickly as the rage came, the calm came. Do what you came here to do. This is why you came here, he said to himself. He quickly walked the half a block to his car and backed it down the alley. He knew after the kick and the booze that the drunk would still be there. He popped the trunk and threw him in. He was happy that he remembered to wear the rubber gloves he had taken from the shop. Before he left, he scratched out a short note and left it next to the little girl's broken body. I'm sorry I didn't get here in time. The artist. The work on the drunk wouldn't take long at all, Tyler thought to himself. He had a garage, so he pulled in and got to work. He didn't want to take the drunk out of the trunk for fear that the guy would regain consciousness. To be safe, Tyler decided to tie his hands. He had seen tattoos done before. He liked the shows about them like Ink Master and Best Ink. He appreciated the unbelievable talent those artists had. Tyler liked to draw and was actually pretty good, but he had never done anything with it. That would change tonight. He got the tattoo gun set up the way he thought it should be, then took a pen and drew a template on the shitbag. It would be a good test to see how unconscious he was. He didn't move a millimeter. Tyler fired up the machine. It buzzed and vibrated in his hand. Here we go, he thought. He did a first line on him, and the guy was still as out cold as a rock, so he got to work as quickly as he could. It's not like it's got to be pretty or anything. Once he was done, he simply drove back to the alley and dumped him. He couldn't bear to look in the little girl's direction. His intention was to go directly home, but his action was to go buy a case of long necks and drink himself to sleep after the keys were thrown into the backyard again. Paige and Bumpy. One look at Paige Payton Mead 10 years ago and you would have said she had it all. Her IQ was off the charts, and she had a master's degree in business management. She was drop-dead gorgeous, with dark hair, incredible eyes, and an hour and a half spent in the gym every day. She could have had any man she wanted. She was married to the man of her dreams, her high school sweetheart. She worked at one of the top investment firms around, making 6 figures, and was about to make VP. Her husband Matt had a good job, but he didn't need one. He had been born into money. They had a huge house, complete with a maid and a butler. It was perfect but for a lack of kids, which she definitely wanted. It was a house of cards that fell. It only took one day. Her day started like many Americans, with a stop at Starbucks. Like many of their stores, this one had a drive-through for the commuters that couldn't get their caffeine quick enough. But Paige liked to go inside and wait in line. She figured that if you're going to spend $6.50 for a coffee, then you should enjoy the music, atmosphere, and the friendly banter of the baristas. The company trained them well, and Paige thought many of them would do well in the corporate world. People ordered 100 different variations of 100 different drinks, and the baristas fixed the vast majority correctly, all the while remembering just about every name and face that came through with any regularity. Her husband's favorite drink was so complicated that Paige had to store it in her iPhone in case the lack of caffeine in her system disabled her rockstar memory. Yet the spiky-haired Brittany who was taking her order this morning could recite it as soon as Paige said, "And I'll also need..."
Impressive.
Paige would compliment her.
You know me, Paige. Besides, how could I forget that gorgeous husband of yours drink?
Was the usual response. And with a wink at Paige, Brittany would be on to the next customer with the same brilliant recall and charm. I should offer her a job as my personal assistant or something. She could work her way up to being a corporate officer in no time. She would have to lose the spiky multicolored hair, though. Yeah, to Paige, coming inside was totally worth the money and standing in line. She got her drink and turned to head out the door, and as she did, she noticed her landscaper Bumpy sitting in his usual spot. He was an odd-looking man, but when he spoke, he seemed to convey an intelligence beyond your normal landscaper. It was almost as if landscaping was something he did to relax when he was done with his normal job. She waved at him and headed into work. The complete and utter train wreck that was Paige's day started with the job. There were 10 VPs in the company Paige worked for, and 4 were women, so she thought her chances were good for getting the promotion. But as it turned out, all 4 of the women slept their way to the top, and none was looking for any more competition, especially from someone smarter and better looking. Instead of a call from the CEO's office with the good news, Paige received a call from Human Resources. She wasn't alarmed at first. Maybe it had to do with the promotion, and someone had put the cart before the horse. Upon arrival at the office, though, she was promptly informed of the sexual harassment suits against her by the female VPs. The 4 other female VPs were so threatened by Paige that they pooled together accusations of her aggressive lesbian advances. She vehemently denied the false charges and reminded Human Resources that she was happily married to the man of her dreams. In response, she was told that in this day and age it didn't really matter, and she was advised to get a good lawyer if she was planning on fighting it. Instead of being promoted, she was being fired. Her office was locked and she was escorted from the building. Just like that. 4 jealous bitches against 1 honest woman, and her career was shot. She left the building humiliated and in tears. She wasn't worried so much about the money, but she had worked long and hard in her career, and if they won, she would never work in the industry again. On the other side of the coin, even if Paige won, she could never be truly vindicated. She would forever be labeled with the rumors of how she was elevated to her position, and would most likely never taken seriously. She needed to calm down and get her head straight. She went to the gym and did a blowout workout, then went home to be with Matt. He would know how to calm her down so she could figure out which course of action to take. Her husband often worked from home, and today was one of those days. When she pulled up to the house, there was a strange but familiar car in the driveway. Where in the world have I seen that car? She thought. Upon entering the house, the answer to the question of who the car belonged to was still a mystery, but the gender of the driver wasn't. A cheap black leather purse was on the table in the foyer. She stopped for a second and stared at it. She had a feeling in her gut that her day had just gone from horrible to catastrophic. She took a deep breath, thinking, "Don't panic. Get it together and don't jump to conclusions. It could be one of Matt's clients or something." She tried to keep that way of thinking intact, but after just a few more steps into the house, she started to find clothes strewn about. First, she saw some of Matt's clothes, and then women's yoga pants, a pair of panties, and a green shirt with a name tag on it. She stopped to pick it up. It read Brittany. The mystery was solved. It was her favorite Starbucks barista. It was a devastating kick to the gut. She fell to her knees in agony, her heart breaking with every panicked gasp. She was sucking in air and on the verge of hyperventilating. Then she heard the screams and grunts of passion coming from upstairs. They hadn't even heard her come in. With every yes, she heard, the pain got worse. She finally stood up and decided to go upstairs and see for herself. A desperate grasp for her old life compelled her to find out if it was real or if she was just mentally breaking down. When she opened her bedroom door, she saw the spiky-haired, tattooed Brittany totally naked and riding her husband, the man she had loved since high school. Most of Paige's soul died at that moment. She just turned around and started to walk back down the stairs. She didn't know where she was going or why. She just wanted to get away from that scene. She ignored the calls from her husband and the giggling of Brittany. When she got to her front door, she went out, sat on the front steps, and broke down again. Finding her loving husband in bed with the 18-year-old coffee shop girl that she saw every morning on the way to work was the final nail in the coffin. It was at this moment that Paige Payton Mead ceased being a beautiful, up-and-coming businesswoman, wife, and future mother. She instantly became one of the most dangerous women in the world. It was the day she became the only female member of the Invisible. While she was sitting on her front porch crying and contemplating suicide, the owner of the landscape company that did her lawn pulled up in his old white van. At the same time, her husband and Brittany, the coffee shop slut, left walking right by her without saying a word. Bumpy, the owner of Bumpy's Landscaping, was not an attractive man, although he did possess charm and an even higher IQ than Paige did. He was also a killer that was about to take a rare risk. He was able to assess the situation for what it was very quickly, basically confirming his suspicions about the woman. He had been the contractor on the property for a month, and not for the purpose of money. It was a landscape maintenance contract and it paid well, but it was no big deal. The purpose was to kill Paige. He hated women in general, but especially the kind like Paige, the kind who had it all and would never even give him a first look. He liked the look they gave him while they were dying by his hand, though. In that moment, he saw something in Paige that he had seen in himself years ago and decided to risk it all. Bumpy walked up to Paige, and before she could open her mouth, he said,
"It's not the man's fault. Though if he had any integrity and loved you, he should be able to keep his dick in his pants, and he does deserve to die. That's up to you. Now women are just evil, and it's in their nature, and they deserve to die. They never even know they're evil till they're pleading for their lives in their final moments."
Paige heard the words but said nothing as she watched Brittany's perfect 18-year-old ass get into her husband's Mercedes. It was as if she was listening to a narration of an evil Disney film. Bumpy's voice was velvet.
You see, you have to be grateful for what you have. Today was the day I was going to kill you. But it seems to me like you've come to a realization about yourself and your situation. So I don't think the day will require me putting a garrote around your neck. So why don't we let go of the self-pity bullshit? I think the world will go on with one less coffee barista.
Every word seeped into Paige's soul. The voice was soothing, understanding, and beautiful. Every word made sense. She watched the Mercedes pull away. When she turned to look at Bumpy, she saw the most beautiful man she had ever seen. She saw trust and respect. She fell in love that quick and went from suicidal to homicidal.
Show me how to do it.
She said. So Bumpy brought her, still somewhat stunned, over to his landscape van. Inside, he had a padlocked footlocker full of everything one would need to commit a murder. Things to kill with that got the job done. A sniper rifle, a handgun and ammunition, a bulletproof vest, knives, a garrote. He had things to help get away with it too. Cleaning supplies, disguises, throwaway guns, throwaway cell phones, fingerprint kits. He had everything. Rubber gloves, duct tape, drugs, things used to plant evidence to throw the police in another direction, and a complete notebook with possible scenarios and alibis. This would be the test to see if he really had her. If she came to her senses, he would just do what he originally planned and kill her right then. But she didn't, and she started asking questions like, "When can we do it?" Bumpy was a detail-oriented man and had already been aware of her husband's Starbucks lover and where they went.
We can take care of that little situation right now if you like,
he said. Paige's eyes seemed to turn as black and lifeless as you see on serial killers' mugshots. Bumpy had just acquired a very dangerous weapon, a woman scorned. Moses de la Cruz. The morning briefing was torture. Why she ever became a cop was beyond her. Maybe I thought I was going to find a man of principle, she thought. Fat chance. A bunch of donut-eating out-of-shape ticket punchers. The ones that weren't out of shape were all hands. The few dates she had been on, she spent fending off getting felt up. Mo was 32 years old, Cuban, and built pretty nicely. She stayed in shape by working out on a consistent basis. She wasn't a bodybuilder, but she could easily make the transition. She had some serious muscles. One of the reasons she stayed in such good shape was that she wanted to have a baby someday. It seemed like time was running out and it would never happen. She loved the police force because it was an honorable thing to do, but it wasn't going to get her a baby or a husband. She promised herself that if they caught the guy that was on this murder spree, she would quit and do just about anything else. Being on this task force was getting to her a lot. Almost all of the victims were children. Dufflin was speaking to the task force in what was becoming known among the police force as the rant.
This update should be quick since we don't really have anything new. Summer Eiley, 8 years old, everyone got a picture? It's been 48 hours and we'll be knocking on doors in a 20-block radius. It's a big job, and it will get bigger. I want to know the whereabouts of everyone that lives in that radius for the last 48 hours.
He was actually screaming at them as if they were children being scolded. He used to be the guy to learn from, the experienced pro. Now it seemed like he was the guy to learn how to lose your temper from. It was getting to him. 6 months and the bodies were piling up with hardly any leads. But Dufflin was missing things he never missed before. He would mouth off to the press, and they would use it. It was great TV to see the lead of the task force sounding like he wasn't in control. Mo actually said to him, "Can't you see that's what they want? It scares people and they're glued to their sets. People watch the news more than their favorite shows. The media loves it. But the worst part is that whoever is doing this is watching too, and he or she is not dumb. He knows the public's scared and he knows you're frustrated, so he's not going to stop. You give away our next move." Izzy. The Black was a notorious motorcycle club that was about 700 members strong, based in the state of Florida. They were not to be messed with, they were the real deal. They ran drugs, guns, prostitutes, and everything else. If they knew of you, then you were either on their good side or their bad side. They had a code, as most gangs do. When you joined for life. If you left, chances are you weren't breathing any longer. Izzy was the only member to have left alive. He didn't even ask to leave. Chico made that call. That was one person nobody messed with. Chico was former Army Ranger, specializing in black ops, and he was still very well connected. He was also Izzy's father. The man was connected in the bad world, the good world, and the secret world. If a drug deal went bad over here, someone over there disappeared, along with the entire crop and members of whatever cartel sect had supplied it. Nobody ever questioned it when Izzy left the club. A few members were there the day that Malik had tattooed him. Izzy was welcome at any club function or ride. Sometimes he would do a ride, but he stayed away from the parties. He figured that if you hang around a barbershop long enough, that eventually you'll get a haircut. Izzy meant everything to Chico. He was 27 and part Latino, which accounted for the jet black hair hanging down his back in a 3-foot-long ponytail. He was just a few years sober and a talented mechanic. He got his blue eyes from his Swedish mom. He looked about as dangerous as you could look, with a smile from ear to ear. Always the smile. He was eternally grateful to be alive. Today was opening day of his motorcycle repair shop, and things looked promising. Hell, I know I got at least 700 pieces of business coming in at some point, he thought, as he rode down the street. He was sure some of his AA buddies would want work done too. He just about shit a brick as he looked down the straightaway toward the shop. About 100 bikes were in the parking lot. The Black had shown up to help kick off opening day. Malik's Inc. was 10 buildings up the block, and as he passed he thought to himself, "Thank you, Malik, and thank you, God." He pulled up out front with that smile beaming for all to see. "Are you telling me all you guys simultaneously broke down right here?" Earl Knightley. To get away with murder is not an easy thing to do. The definition of a serial murder is the unlawful killing of two or more victims by the same offender in separate events. The killers can walk among us for years in complete anonymity. Some are never caught. They are racially diverse and not always the typical white male loner who is always nice and just kept to himself. Serial killers match the population. They are the invisible ones. They are often contributing members of society and appear completely normal. Their motives can range from anger to hatred of a category of people, or society in general, to financial gain, to a simple desire for fame. Their rationale is ever evolving. Sexual satisfaction is a frequent motive. Serial killers choose victims who are available and vulnerable, and many times that means women and children. Profilers describe this breed as a male who may have come from an abusive background. His father could have been anything from sadistic to overly strict. His mother may have been promiscuous or smothering. While killing, he is retreating from the pain of childhood and advancing into a world where only he is in control. He gets gratification in the violent domination of others. A serial murderer who targets women may be trying to destroy someone who represents his cruel mother. A child killer may be going after those who embody what he despises in himself, especially cracks in his own masculinity. Sounds like a lot of psychobabble, but it's pretty much true. Those guys always get caught, he said aloud. When Knightley was alone, he always talked aloud and always to a fake camera. He acted like he was being interviewed. Lately, he even did it when he had a victim. I think they enjoy the notoriety, he said as he shrugged his shoulders. They're spontaneous and they always feel guilt. Now those are the worst two things you can be or do. He chuckled in a superior way. It was as though he were practicing for an interview. You've got to plan things and keep a checklist. What's a checklist? You detail out everything about the person or persons, another chuckle, where and how they will be killed, but most importantly, clean up an alibi. DNA is a big factor these days, so rubber gloves are very important, and disposal of the body, especially if you want to have sex with them. No body, no DNA. If you're careful, you can leave a body without DNA. That's what I've been doing. Earl sat down on the top of an old, rusty 55-gallon drum and cocked his head as though he had an audience. I don't seem to have a lot of time for lists these days, even though I know they are critical. But you see, I'm going for the record. I'm averaging 4 a month. Now, I did research everybody before I started, but some of them move or change their habits. So you have to improvise or grab someone else. Now I'm not counting people I've killed before this run. I'm practically a star now, and I won't be able to tell about everyone till later. I can't wait for the ending. I'm only at 25, and I'm all the news talks about. Pretty soon it will be autographs and talk shows. No more living in the warehouse where I work. Sorry, but that's all I have time for right now. Number 26 isn't going to kill herself, you know. Bumpy and Paige. Bumpy grabbed some things out of the trunk and transferred them to a gym bag. The van and Paige's car were too recognizable, so they stopped on the way and got a nondescript rental car.
Needless to say, there's no turning back now,
Bumpy said. They were sitting in the parking lot of the posh hotel where her husband had taken Brittany, and Paige was staring up at the windows of the upper floors. She nodded her head yes, but didn't take her eyes off the top floor. He would be up there in the penthouse suite. Of that she was certain. Whenever they had traveled, that's the only room he would accept.
You have to do exactly what I say when I say to do it. Got that? No questions. I will answer anything you want after, but when we're in there, you don't say or do anything unless I tell you.
Understood.
Smart girl! Now I know you're sure about the penthouse suite, but we need to be absolutely certain. So here's what we do. I'm going into the lobby and have a seat near a house phone, and in 5 minutes I'm going to order room service to the penthouse. You're going to be somewhere between the elevator and the kitchen. When you see the waiter bringing the food up, walk by him and ask him if that's going to room 987, like as if you just stepped out and didn't want to miss him. He will most likely respond no and tell you that it's going to the penthouse.
Why would he tell me where it's going?
She said, still staring at the upper floor.
Because you're a pretty lady, and lowly waiters fantasize about pretty ladies and will want to talk. Trust me, he will. That will confirm their location. Once that's done, he's going to go up and knock, and they will wonder what the hell, and tell him to go away. About 10 minutes later, we will knock, He's gonna be pissed because he's trying to get laid, and he'll open the door to tell the waiter off. And then his day's gonna start going bad.
Let's do it.
She said, finally looking back at him. It worked exactly as Bumpy said it would. Her husband opened a door ready to bitch and was met with a silenced Glock pointed at his face. Bumpy backed him into the room as Paige followed him in. Paige did exactly as she was told and didn't say a word, even when her husband started pleading for his life. Paige, please, you can't do this.
I think she can. You underestimate her, but before she does, I've gotta ask. What were you thinking? You would give her up for a little slut like this? Guys like you make me sick, I mean shit. I usually kill women like your wife, cause they never give guys like me a second glance. They always go for assholes that don't appreciate what they have.
I took her for granted. He got on his knees. Please forgive me. The half-naked Brittany was on the bed, terrified.
This is the fun part, Paige. Watching them beg. But we don't have a lot of time, so reach into the bag, Paige, and put that plastic raincoat thingy on and grab the knife.
Paige again did as she was told, all the while not saying a word. When she was ready, Bumpy pointed at Brittany.
Her first, just once in the chest.
Brittany's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe it would actually happen. This was the final test for Paige, Bumpy thought. At this point, he didn't really doubt her resolve. But this would solidify it. Paige did as she was told, and she did it quick. Bumpy barely had the words out of his mouth, and she was moving across the room like a private taking an order from a drill sergeant. She plunged the knife deep into Brittany's chest, killing her instantly. Then she started walking back, and Bumpy said,
Impressive. Now go take a shower, don't get any blood on your clothes.
He tossed her a bandana from his pocket. She wiped her hands and started undressing right there in front of Bumpy and her husband. Paige was now staring at Bumpy, aroused after the killing. Bumpy stared back for just a second, not wanting to give her husband a millisecond's chance at escape.
God damn. Look at that. Are you serious? You would give up that for that?
He gestured at Brittany's dead body on the blood-soaked mattress. Paige's husband was now shaking and just about to piss himself. Paige went and took a shower as she was told, and when she came out, her husband was on top of Brittany's body, stabbing it. Paige looked at Bumpy with a questioning look on her face but still said nothing. She had taken her instructions seriously.
Look, Paige, your husband just killed that girl,
Bumpy said mockingly. It's okay, honey, we worked it out, her husband said as he climbed off the corpse. He was covered in blood. I will figure a way out of this. Just leave like you said, he said to Bumpy.
Nah, we're gonna party first,
Bumpy said, laughing as he reached into his bag and pulled out a crack pipe and a rather large bag of crack. And then you'll leave?
Well, yeah.
Bumpy made him fill the pipe with more than enough for a normal hit.
Fire it up,
Bumpy said. He did as he was told and took in a huge hit. As he blew the smoke out, Bumpy ordered, again. A look of resignation washed over her husband's face as he looked to Bumpy with his gun pointed at him. So he took another hit and another and another. He was too much of a coward to voluntarily take a bullet. He proved that by stabbing an already dead girl that 20 minutes earlier had been giving him head. When the cardiac arrest came, he squeezed his hand so tightly that the glass pipe shattered in his hand. He slumped face down on the coffee table.
Now, if you came into this room and saw this scene, you wouldn't even question the alibi of the wife, would you?
No.
She finally spoke as she walked closer to Bumpy, kissing him full on the lips.
Let's go home, babe,
she said. In the next few months, every female VP at her old firm died while on vacation. The rich take exotic, adventurous vacations, and the opportunities were endless. One girl's parachute didn't open on a skydiving trip. One died scuba diving. One disappeared hiking in Tahiti. Paige Payton Mead's favorite was when the last one decided to go on an African safari. She wanted so badly to record the hyenas tearing the bitch's body apart and show it to Bumpy. But she had learned from Bumpy that lack of evidence was key. She did make sure the bitch VP saw her waving to her as she pleaded for help. In another few short months, Paige inherited nearly $500 million.